Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 13 NFL Power Rankings. And real quick before we get into the video, I am using a different mic than I usually use because the mic I typically use has been giving me problems. So I want to know what you guys think of this new mic. If you guys don't notice the difference, great, but if you guys do notice the difference, let me know which mic you like better. But we'll start this video by briefly recapping my rankings from last week, what those teams did in Week 12. Last week at number 10, I had the Buccaneers. They got destroyed by the Rams, losing 34-7. 9th was the Bears. They beat the Steelers 31-28. Number 8, I had the Bills. They lost the Texans 23-19. 7, I had the Lions. They beat the Giants 34-27 in overtime. 6 was the Broncos. They were on a bye. Number 5, I had the Eagles. They lost the Cowboys 24-21. 4th was the Seahawks. They beat the Titans 30-24. 3rd was the Colts. They lost the Chiefs 23-20. 2nd was the Patriots. They beat the Bengals 26-20. And number 1 was the Rams, and they destroyed the Buccaneers 34-7. But getting into this week's rankings, beating things at number 10, I've got the Bills. The Bills, they fall to number 10 after they lost the Texans by a score of 23-19 on Thursday Night Football. And the Bills did not play that well, especially offensively. As the offense for the Bills put up just 19 points, but really 12 offensive points, because they also returned a kickoff for a touchdown. But a big reason the offense struggled for the Bills was the offensive line, because they were terrible, and Josh Allen got sacked a career high 8 times. But Josh Allen, he also didn't have his best game, throwing 2 interceptions. Now, the Bills did run the football pretty effectively, but it wasn't enough to carry the offense. But James Cook finished the game with 116 yards on the ground and a score, and the Bills as a team ran for 143 yards on 6 yards per carry. Now, the defense for the Bills wasn't terrible, but they also weren't amazing, allowing 23 points. But this was not a very good performance for the Bills, especially offensively. They need the offense to be a lot better, they need their offensive line to be a lot better. And after a while, I've got the Bills falling to number 10. But if you do want to drop them further, I can definitely understand that. 9th, I have the Packers. The Packers re-enter my top 10 at number 9 after they beat the Vikings by a score of 23-6. And this was a nice and easy win for the Packers. The offense is pretty good, putting up 23 points, although it still seems like the offense hasn't fully clicked. But Jordan Love was solid, throwing for 139 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions. And the Packers ran the football really effectively despite not having Josh Jacobs. As backup running back Emmanuel Wilson had a nice game, rushing for 107 yards and 2 scores, and the Packers as a team ran for 146. And then defensively for the Packers, they were great. They held the Vikings to just 6 points, didn't allow a touchdown, also got 5 sacks, and forced 3 turnovers. But a nice dominant win for the Packers, as they beat a division rival. They've now won back-to-back games after a brief 2-game losing streak, and I've got the Packers at number 9. 8th, I've got the Bears. So the Bears, they move up to number 8 after they beat the Steelers by a score of 31-28. And this is another win and a close game for the Bears, and it's another game where I don't feel they played their best game, but they still found a way to get the win. But the offense for the Bears, they were pretty solid. They put up 31 points, and Caleb Williams had a pretty nice game, throwing for 239 yards and 3 scores, although he did lose a fumble in the end zone, which the Steelers recovered for a touchdown. And then receiver DJ Moore also had a nice game, as he caught 2 touchdowns. And then the defense for the Bears, they weren't amazing, allowing 28 points to a Mason Rudolph-led Steelers offense. But the defense, they forced a couple turnovers, got 2 sacks, and also got some big stops late in the 4th quarter to hold on for the win. But it's another close win for the Bears. They've now won 6 games in a row by 1 possession, and the Bears turn at 8-3 on the season, and I've got them at number 8. Number 7, I've got the Lions. So the Lions remained here at number 7 after they beat the Giants 34-27 in overtime. And this is a decent win for the Lions, but they actually almost lost this game, because they were down 27-17 early in the 4th quarter, after James Winston caught a touchdown pass, but then the Giants blew another 4th quarter lead. And the Lions, they scored the final 17 points this game to tie and eventually win the game in overtime. But the offense for the Lions, they played pretty well. Jared Goff, a nice bounce back game, throwing for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And Amon-Ra St. Brown was also a lot better this week, with 9 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown. And then Jahmyr Gibbs was insane for the Lions, as both a runner and a receiver, as he ran the ball 15 times for 219 yards and 2 scores, including a 69-yard touchdown run, which ended up being the game winner. And as a receiver, Gibbs also caught 11 passes for 45 yards and another score. Now, the defense for the Lions, they weren't amazing, as they allowed 27 points and over 500 yards of offense, but they got the stop in overtime to seal the win. They got a big red zone stop late in the 4th quarter to keep it a 3-point game. And the defense, while they weren't great, they came up big in some big moments. But it's a win for the Lions, not the best win, a close win over the Giants, who just have 2 wins on the season. But the Lions turn out 7-4, and I've got them at number 7. Number 6, I've got the Eagles. So the Eagles, they fall a spot to number 6 after they lost the Cowboys 24-21. And this is a pretty bad game for the Eagles, especially in the second half. But the Eagles, they actually got off to a great start. They scored touchdowns in each of their first 3 drives. They went up 21-0, and it looked like they might be in line for a blowout win. But then the offense hit a wall, and the defense started allowing points, and allowed the Cowboys to score 24 straight. And the Eagles, they also made some big mistakes in the fourth quarter, allowing the Cowboys to come back. As the Eagles, they missed a field goal in the fourth quarter and also fumbled twice, plus they had a ton of penalties. But this was not a great game for the Eagles. But the offense for the Eagles, as I said, they scored 21 points on their first 3 drives, and they had 187 total yards on their first 3 drives. But then, the entire rest of the game, the Eagles, they didn't score a single point, and they had just 150 yards on their next 8 drives. And a big problem for the Eagles was they didn't run the football. Saquon Barkley had just 10 carries all game, and the Eagles, after they went up 21-0, still didn't run the ball too effectively, or too much, as they ran the ball just 11 times compared to throwing it 22. And that's definitely a big problem for the Eagles, because their pass game isn't great, and, when your pass game's not great, you kind of need to run the football, and when you're not doing either, obviously you're going to run into a problem, like we saw this week. Now, the defense for the Eagles wasn't terrible, but there's only so much the defense can do when your offense is doing nothing every possession. But not a great performance for the Eagles, and with how bad their offense has been, it was only a matter of time until they were going to lose the game. It ended up being this week against the Cowboys, and they're now 8-3 on the season, and I've got the Eagles at number 6 in my power rankings. Coming in at number 5, I've got the Colts. The Colts, they fall a couple spots to number 5 after they lost to the Chiefs 23-20 in overtime. And the Colts, they're another team who blew a lead this week. As the Colts, they were leading 20-9 entering the fourth quarter, but then they allowed the Chiefs to tie and eventually win the game in overtime. But this was not a great performance for the Colts. The offense tied a season low with just 20 points, and the Colts, they've actually been held to just 20 points in all 3 of their losses. But a big problem for the Colts this week was Jonathan Taylor got shut down, rushing for just 58 yards on 3.6 yards per carry, and that put a lot more pressure on Daniel Jones, and he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't good enough for the Colts to win the game, as he finished the game going 19 of 31 for 181 yards and 2 scores. And then defensively for the Colts, they also weren't terrible, but they also weren't amazing, as they allowed 23 points, although they did allow nearly 500 yards of offense. But this is a pretty big loss for the Colts, because they're now 8-3 on the season, their lead in the division is now just 1 game, and they've also got a much tougher schedule the rest of the way, as every team left in their schedule is currently over 500. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the Colts bounce back to this, and how they respond now playing good teams. But the Colts, after the loss, I've got them at number 5. Number 4, I've got the Broncos. The Broncos, they continue to move up. They're on a bye this week. They're currently 9-2, have the number 2 seed in the AFC, and they're leading the AFC West, and next week the Broncos play the Commanders. Third, I've got the Seahawks. So Seahawks, they come in at number 3, after they beat the Titans by a score of 30-24. And this was a good game for the Seahawks, because the final score makes it look a lot closer than it really was, but the Seahawks, they were pretty much in control of this game the entire way. But the offense for the Seahawks, they were great. They put up 30 points, and Sam Darnold had a nice bounce-back game after throwing 4 interceptions last week. This week, he threw for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns. And JSN had another huge game, with 8 catches for 167 yards and 2 scores. And he actually broke the Seahawks single-season receiving record in just 12 games, as on the season he's got 1,313 yards. And he's actually on pace to break the NFL single-season receiving record and break Calvin Johnson's record of, I think, 1,964 yards. And then running the football for the Seahawks, they're also good, as they ran for 114 yards on 5.7 yards per carry. And then the defense for the Seahawks, they were also good in this game. They did end up allowing 24 points, but the defense still played pretty well. And it's a nice bounce-back win for the Seahawks after the loss to the Rams last week, and after the win of the Titans this week, I've got the Seahawks at number 3. Second, I've got the Patriots. The Patriots, they enter at number 2 after they beat the Bengals 26-20. The offense for the Patriots, they had another good game, putting up 26 points, and Drake May looked great once again, as he threw for 295 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And tight end Hunter Henry also had a nice game, as he caught 7 passes for 115 yards and found the end zone. Now, on the ground, the Patriots weren't super effective, but they were still decent, rushing for 107 yards on 3.5 yards per carry. But the Patriots, they did suffer some big injuries along the offensive line, as left tackle Will Campbell and left guard Jared Wilson both left the game with injury and are expected to miss some time. But that's really the only bad news for the Patriots offense this week, otherwise they played pretty well. Then the defense for the Patriots, they were pretty solid, allowing 20 points. But it's another win for the Patriots. This time they beat the Bengals. Their winning streak's now up to 9 games. They're currently sitting as the top seed in the AFC, and I've got the Patriots at number 2. And coming in at number 1, I've got the Rams. So the Rams, they remain at number 1 after they destroyed the Buccaneers, winning 34-7. And this was a great game for the Rams. They got off to a great start, as they were up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, and they were up 31-7 at halftime, and then they kind of just coasted through the second half. But the offense for the Rams was great. Matthew Stafford put up another great performance with 273 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2 of them went to Devontae Adams. And the defense for the Rams also dominated, allowing just 7 points, 193 total yards, also getting 4 sacks, forcing 2 turnovers, and returning 1 of them for his touchdown. But it's a dominant win for the Rams. They're now 9-2. I think they're the best team in the NFL, and that's why I've got them at number 1. But those are my Week 13 NFL Power Rankings. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.